Well, here we are again. I hope you lot appreciate all the work I do for you. It's hot, and now I'm having to taste wine just to tell you what it's like and where it comes from. So, for all this hard work, perhaps you miserable buggers can subscribe and like my video. Oh, I'm only joking, it's bloody marvellous out here. So this episode, what am I going to cover? I'm going to look at harvesting the grapes for the Languedoc wine. So I'm in the Languedoc region, famous for its wine, more specifically in the Minervois part of Languedoc. And any wine buffs out there will really know this is good wine. I'm afraid I'm not particularly into wine. I drink it quite happily. I'm not a wine buff. I couldn't tell you much about it. So what I can do is I can show you the harvest. I can tell you what the local farmers tell me and the local vintners tell me and pass on to me, which is quite fun. And I've got some interesting video on the harvesting and the winery, the Vineyard, where they actually produce the wine. I'm going to cover that. As I say, I'm not a wine specialist. If you are a wine specialist, I'd love to hear your comments. Put them in the comments below. And let's have a look. Really, I want to especially thank the POUZOLS-MINERVOIS Vineyard, who welcomed me with open arms, took me on the harvester, showed me round, and were really welcoming. I have to say, I approached a couple of others and they weren't very keen to talk. They didn't want anyone turning up with a camera, and so I was slightly surprised by that. But anyway, POUZOLS-MINERVOIS, a friend of mine was in the co-op there. He talked to them. They were fantastic, really welcoming. So thank you, and I'll put a link in to their vigneron and their wine in the comments. So if you like the look of what they're producing here, by all means go and buy some of their wine. So what I'm going to look at particularly is the harvest this year. This year's been a difficult one. It's been a drought. The river that we normally walk across and swim in the summer is now completely dry. And unfortunately the grapes have been similar. Normally we drive along at this time of the year and you see these great big bunches of plump, deep blue, black, purpley grapes ready for harvest. This year they're small, wrinkly raisins. Again, I'll put some pictures in, and that's going to affect the wine. That's a good thing, because every year the wine is different, but I think this year's been a really difficult one for the wine, for the grape growers, for the wine growers. The way wine is produced here is on a scale really. You've got your local artisan vintners. Typically anyone who grows grapes will make some wine, and that's generally a small batch of wine. It's homemade. It changes dramatically with every year, and it's kind of the vintner's take on how wine should be. It's how they like wine, and there's no controls. They pretty much make it how they like. And there's hundreds of them around here. There's one I like in particular called Anne Allier. She makes a red wine. For me, it's the fruitiest wine. It's got none of that tannin, sharp kick to it, and she makes a beautiful wine. It's small batch. She's in a neighbouring village. She has her phone number on the bottle. It's real small artisan stuff, and I just love that. The next up, you've got the cooperatives, and that's how most of the people grow here. They belong to a cooperative. Sometimes it's a cooperative for a village, sometimes it's a cooperative for a number of villages or regions joined together. And obviously that gives them economy of scale. So when you've got a large winery, you've got large stainless steel tanks and equipment to buy, then obviously if you form a cooperative and you're part of a cooperative, it makes it far more efficient to produce wine that way. They also then have budgets for things like marketing. Certain wineries will suddenly decide they're going to push their marketing, they'll put a lot of money into it, they'll get a specialist in, they'll do a lot of design, and sometimes they benefit from it, sometimes they don't. It's just like any business, but by being part of that cooperative, they have those economies of scale where they can afford that type of thing. Likewise, they can often afford a specialist to come in and actually solve a problem they've got, or to produce a certain type of wine that they've been aiming for, and they have the budget to do that. As members of the cooperative, they all get a say in how it's run. There is generally obviously a structure of management in a cooperative. So for example, when I wanted to film, the grower was part of a cooperative. He talks to the cooperative first, and the cooperative decide really whether they're happy to have that filmed. And as I say, in this case, very, very welcoming. And the farmers all form part of that cooperative. They tend to work together. They tend to look after each other, look out for each other's crops, help each other during the pruning season. We'll come on to that. But also it gives them much more buying power. After the local cooperatives, you've really got the international brands. These are the big boys. These are turning out millions of bottles a year. They buy pretty much all the grapes from an area, and it's a big business. I'm really not talking about that here. What they do is they produce a homogenized standard product every year. Pretty much every year will taste like the other year, because that's what people want. It's not what I want, but it's what a lot of people, when they get a label they like in the supermarket, they'll keep buying that label because they liked it last time, and they want each year to taste roughly the same. That's a very different market to what we're talking about here. We're generally talking about much smaller amounts, much more individual, based around the year of the grape. We'll have a quick look at the growing of the grapes. It's not a subject I know a whole lot about, but obviously while I'm out here, I walk the dog, I walk through the vineyards, and I get to see what's going on. The main thing about growing the grapes here is the terroir, the character of the grapes, and that's taken from the land, the weather, the sunshine, the rain. It's the entire environment sort of packaged into the terroir, and it kind of sets the taste and the character of the grape and the harvest. It's sometimes as simple as which way the vines go, whether they're north, south, east, west, as to whether the sun warms them quickly in the morning and they get shade from the other vines in certain rows. But it's more to do with the soil and how they're looked after and how they're grown. So typically, a lot of the terroir, a lot of the AOPs won't allow the growers to irrigate. So the grape has to be what the weather was for that year, such as this year. And it's a lot about how they look after them, whether they can feed them, and what they can do with them. So that's kind of covers the terroir. There's then obviously the different varieties of grape, like Grenache or Pinot Noir, and obviously that has a huge influence on the taste of the grape as well. There's a few key milestones in the growing period. The two that I seem to notice the most around here is the pruning. Huge amounts of pruning. I mean, unbelievable hours standing in a field pruning each individual vine, walking down the rows of vines, pruning. It's hard work, it's manual labour, it's time consuming. Sometimes they're out on their own, you know, for hours and hours in the field. Sometimes they'll pair up with another co-op member and they'll help each other with each other's fields, but it's a huge amount of hard labour, and it's only manual. You can only do it manually. They have these pneumatic, battery powered pruning shears, take off a whole branch with a snip. They also take off a finger. You'd be surprised how many fingers are missing around here, where people are getting tired doing the grapes and pruning the vines, and suddenly, boof, off comes a finger. It comes off instantly, apparently, so I'm told reliably. But there's a huge amount of work in the pruning. And then obviously there's the harvest. The harvest is high pressure, it's time based. It's usually when the thunderstorms are coming. Certainly in this area, harvest tends to be the thunderstorm season. So you get these sort of stormy build-ups like we've just had. We had a thunderstorm, quite a lot of thunderstorms last night. And you get that sort of humid build-up, and you can see all the farmers running around like crazy trying to get as much of their grapes in as they can before the hail from the thunderstorm smashes the grapes. So harvest is always high pressure, and of course, like in any crop, they're all doing it at roughly the same time. So if your harvester breaks down, you're not likely to be able to borrow one from somebody else because they're at the same point as well. So harvest is another big time. Between the pruning and the harvesting, obviously there's the growing season. They can't just forget about it. They have to decide whether they want to irrigate, whether they can irrigate because of their terroir. And also there's things like mildew and just general treatment with fungicides and the like. There's an interesting aside there that a lot of the vineyards at the end of each row of vines, or some rows of vines, they'll have a rose. And I was asking a friend what that's about, and he was saying that it's because roses get almost exactly the same infections and illnesses as vines get, but they show them much quicker. So if the rose is showing mildew, then you can be pretty certain your vines are going to be doing it too. But because they're more woody and tougher, it takes longer to show. So they sort of plant roses at the ends of some of the rows of the vines to use like a sort of litmus paper or a canary in the mine to indicate any illnesses that are going through the vines. I thought that was quite interesting. The other funny thing that I saw one day was they have these dinky little tractors. They're very narrow tractors to get down between the vines, and they look like toy tractors. They're perfectly strong tractors, but they look like toys. And seeing this little tractor going down between the vines with the farmer driving along in the cab, all very comfortable in the cab. And he's huge. How do I say it politically correct? That's sort of political correctness. Fat. She was fat. She was vast. Sat on the bonnet of the tractor with two sprayers spraying the vines on either side, just going along, sat on the tractor. And you're thinking the health and safety element of that. If she slipped off there, maybe that's what he was planning. I think even that dinky tractor would have caused her some damage. Let's talk about the harvest, because that's really what we're looking at here, and this is what I really wanted to show you. Obviously the timing of the harvest is critical. When the grapes are just right, always comes at the storm season, so it's always a bit like the arable farmers in the UK. Their crop gets flattened with rain just when they're about to harvest it with storms, and it's similar here, except it's hail that breaks the grapes, that damages the grapes. So it's always a fairly high pressure time of the year for the farmers here. And there's two ways they can harvest. There's hand harvesting and there's machine harvesting. Very little hand harvesting now. I did try to follow a cooperative member who hand harvests, and the co-op didn't want me to film anything, which is a bit sad because it would have been nice to show you, but we'll cover it anyway. I did get plenty of footage of the machine harvesting, which I find mind-blowing. So the hand harvesting, let's cover that first. It's labour intensive, it's hard work, it's hot, it's very hot. I mean, typically out here at the moment it's cool, it's probably in the high 20s, early 30s, but it can be in the 40s at harvest. So it's hot work. You work long hours, you work hard, it's physical. It's literally hand labour, walking, standing all day. There tends to be a large influx of people come in for the harvest. A lot of the Brits that have been here for many decades came in as teenagers for the harvest and never went home. It's a great time. It's a time when everybody has a lot of fun, but it is very, very hard work. Don't think it's a cushy number. It's not. The key thing about hand picking is that the grapes come in a much better quality. You get a higher price for your grapes because they come in as a bunch of grapes on a stem, unbruised, uncut, and in far better quality. Because of that better quality, they also get a better price. That makes a big difference for them. Like any farming, the size of the vineyards is going up all the time, and the economies of scale mean that most of the farmers are now harvesting by machine, and we'll have a look at that. It's just great. As you can see from the video here, the harvester straddles the vines, and as it drives over the top of the vines, it places some silicone cups down underneath the vine and then shakes the vine violently so that the grapes fall off the stem. In fact, the whole grape falls off the actual stem rather than the bunch of grapes falling off normally. So after the harvest has passed, you've got a load of sprues with no grapes on the end. The back here shows the cups taking the grapes up into a hopper at the top, and I've got a closer shot here of the cups being placed under the vine. So here, looking down, you can see the cups being laid down in front of the shaker, and it literally wraps around the vine, shakes the vine, and the grapes fall down into the cups, which then lift them up into the hopper at the top. It's quite violent. The whole vine shakes. 100 meters in front of the machine, you can see the vine shaking. And here's the grapes coming up into the hopper. As you can see, they're individual grapes, not bunches of grapes as you'd expect. And this is quite a nice view taken from the drone. The lights are on the harvester. This was early in the morning with thunderstorms in the air, and that's why the lights are on the harvester. You can see the vine shaking there ahead of it arriving. We did say to him, don't look at the drone, of course. Gotcha. And once the hoppers are full, the tractor pulls up and the hoppers are lifted and tips the grapes straight into the trailer, ready to go off for processing. It lifts them up on both sides of the harvester, so generally speaking there's equal amounts in each hopper. Obviously the grapes are taking quite a beating at this point, so it's also quite a messy process. Often when you follow these trailers along the road, it looks like almost like black ink on the road dripping out the trailer, and it's actually the juice from the grapes. But because these grapes are so dry this year, there was a lot less liquid around, but normally there'd be a lot more liquid in this. Typically you'll empty the hoppers like that from 2 of these rows. You can see from the video roughly how long these rows are, but it'll give you an idea as to how many trailers of grapes you'll get from a decent sized field. Most now are harvested by machine. The machine is obviously faster, operated by one person, and it can harvest 24/7 and is faster than manual picking. And I'm not sure about reliability, but they seem to keep on going, these old machines. The only problem with the machines is that they do damage the grapes, so the grapes come out somewhat cut up, mushed up. We'll have a quick look at the process once the grapes have been harvested. They're typically delivered to the cooperative in these small trailers that obviously fit through the vines just like the dinky tractors. They're delivered to the cooperative, tipped into a large hopper. Typically, if they've been harvested by machine, there's lots of bits of branch, there's even whole logs of wood in there, and they hook them out, and it goes through an auger up into a filter that basically sifts out the leaves, the stems, the bits and pieces, twigs and whatever, that then get taken out. It's then pretty much immediately juiced, so it's the grapes are taken, the juice is taken from the grapes and put into tanks almost immediately at the cooperative, where it's then stored, which will then go on to the winemaking process. I'm not going to cover that here for 2 reasons. One, it's something I know nothing about, and 2, most of these wineries not too happy to show you their whole process. Obviously they're quite proud of their process, and they tend to keep it pretty much to themselves. Once the grapes are juiced, they're stored in these massive vats, and you only have to look at the size of these vats to realise the scale of this industry. It's a big industry. There's a lot of people working in it. It's pretty much the lifeblood of this area. And so when you drive past these wineries and you see these huge stainless steel towers outside, that's only a fraction of them. Inside the building, there's effectively swimming pool sized vats, which are either used for storing the juiced wine or the actual wine process, or in fact the completed wine before it's bottled. Once the wine's been produced, almost all these wineries or vignerons have a shop where they will happily sell you some wine and help you with it, and also give you tastings of the wine, or a dégustation. So if you see a sign saying dégustation, it shows that they're happy to give you samples of the wine, but I think that's probably true of just about all the wineries here. They make a good part of their money by selling to passing traffic and returning people who have liked the wine they've bought previously. As I said before, most of the images that I've used and the video I've used has come from the POUZOLS-MINERVOIS winery. They were incredibly welcoming. In fact, they were more than welcoming. They actually wanted to show me everything. They were excited to show me everything. So if you are in the area, give them a visit, and I'll put a link in the comments. And well, cheers. God, that's good. Ooh. Oh my word, I just had to put this on the end. It was such fun making it with the 360-degree camera. I'll leave that with you. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Bye.